Well, hello there, ladies and gents. Great to see you again, and welcome back to Wisdom and Wealth Pathways to a Life of Significance for You and Your Family. I'm Ryan Ruff, your moderator, and as always, I'll be joined by my right hand man, the star of our show. That's Frank Astorino of the Astorino Financial Group. We're going to be jumping into a really interesting topic today. You know, Frank and I, we love to bring on guest experts onto this show and jump into their unique expertise, the value they're providing and serving to others out there in the world, and how it relates to kind of the intersection of wealth management and really the family dynamic as a whole. And today we thought we'd bring on a really interesting guest, a great friend of Frank's, but also a just fascinating expert in the world of the family dynamic. So today we're bringing on Dr. Teri Rouse. And Dr. Teri Rouse is an early and behavior interventionist. She's an autism and reading specialist. She is an educational coach and a consultant with 30 years of experience working with children from pre-K all the way up through higher education. Not only has she taught children of all ages, in a formal school setting, but also she's an international speaker. She is an international multiple best-selling author. She's the creator of the Real Peaceful Parenting Framework, Better Than You Believe Blueprint, and the Snuggle Bunny Book Club, one of which my favorites personally. But look, Teri's doing some phenomenal work in her own, and because of her own experience, that passion, that love of learning has really transpired and moved its way into helping families and helping parents to be empowered and make smart decisions, bring peace back into their home, and ultimately implement a great style of living and a quality of life for not only the family unit, but of course the children that are going to be benefiting from it. So we thought we'd bring Teri in and discuss this intersection of Frank's world on the wealth management side of things and Teri's world on the educational and the family dynamic. Really some good stuff we're excited to bring to you today. Before we bring Teri on and get into the nitty gritty of everything, let's say hi to the man of the hour. Frank, good to see you today. How are we doing?
Ryan, it's always good to see you, and I'm very excited to bring Teri on, especially since we're traveling that life of significance as well as wisdom and wealth, and we're trying to make a difference in the world, and we want to share that.
It was a slam dunk of a decision. Frank, you and I were talking before we pressed the record button today that we wanted to bring Teri on, trying to figure out how the conversation would play out so that you guys, our audience, would benefit the most from the conversation. And I think we've got a really good avenue of discussion that we're going to be going through today. And so with that, we're super excited to welcome on Dr. Teri Rouse. Teri, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited to be here with you guys. I'm happy to see two of my favorite people too.
Wow.
The feeling's mutual. Well, I'll tell you what. Why don't I'll throw a question over to you, Teri, and why don't we have you just kind of open it up? We're living in a complex world, and I think that's something that is said constantly as time goes on. The world, because of technological innovations, societal innovations, there's just so much changing on such a constant basis, and because of that change, it creates such an interesting dichotomy, really, of challenges that exist for the family as a whole, for the parents, for the children, for anybody walking this earth. I'd love to have you just kind of open up with your thoughts on the challenges that the unit of a family and the family dynamic kind of face in your eyes in today's day and age.
Sure. So there are so many challenges, obviously, that we've all been faced with, especially in the last several years, which have just exacerbated issues that were already there. But aside from the dynamics of the family, there's a financial piece that has stepped into the world that we've never experienced before. On top of that, we have, and we've always had to a certain degree, but it's much greater now. We have children moving back with their parents, with their own children. We have grandparents who are raising their grandchildren. We have parents who are taking care of little children and taking care of aging parents, which we've always had some of that, but it's so much greater today. And on top of that, we typically have two people in the house, whether it's mom and dad or whatever, working. So they're out of the home And there's other kinds of childcare that have come in, education has changed. So parents and grandparents, caring adults is what I like to say, or caregivers, um, are faced with a whole different level of dynamic, not only emotionally and socially, but educationally and financially, because everything that we're talking about costs money. And so, what do you do with that when you don't have the money?
So, Frank, in your eyes, the family dynamic, I mean, Teri brought up some great points. I mean, there's variables at play with money as well as being there to instill great values in a family, hold the family unit together. In your eyes, where do you also see kind of that intersection and the financial component that comes into the family dynamic?
Well, from a context standpoint, the macro view with all the global technological and cultural changes that Terry alluded to, as a backdrop, we have this mounting national debt that in and of itself is manageable, but we also have the transition of wealth going from one generation to another. So the expectation that's out there among the next generation requires and needs a little bit more communication and understanding. The term that in our behavioral finance world is natives of wealth and immigrants of wealth. And we've talked about that before. So uh, people like us or who have established a business or grown a business but didn't come necessarily from wealth or money, we are the immigrants of wealth. We created the wealth. And now we have this next generation who grew up with it, and they're facing all these personal and family dynamic challenges, and the expectation is where our clients and couples need to kind of how do we communicate so that we're talking the same language, native to immigrant and immigrant to native. So the financial literacy is important because while we grew up with, respecting parents and love and unconditional love, you know, they're looking for life balance. They're looking, I worked my whole life for life balance, and now you have a generation that expects it. And because they grew up with it, they grew up with the country club or the pool, and not in every case, but they now want it, and they don't know what it took to get it. So I think, when you see this dynamic of grandparents now raising children and still having their aging parents, or the longevity factor is still there. So, they want to retire early, and we want to know where is our life of significance going to begin. So I'm very intrigued by how we handle the emotional and educational needs of this next generation. And I think the question I would ask Teri, or ask for this next generation, is, what do they expect from the world at large? What are they entitled to, or what's the opportunity and the challenge for them? And the other is, what do they expect from their parents and grandparents, for that matter? Because I think our expectation when we grew up is that we didn't want to burden our parents. We wanted to go and make it and pull ourselves up by the bootstraps. But what do they expect, and how do we exchange with parity, the right answer and the right guidance? That would be my question for you, Derek.
Okay. Well,
So-
wow. So I think that's a very interesting conversation, and that's a whole, we could talk for days on that subject. I think a lot of the expectation, and Frank, I absolutely agree with you that so many of our children, the expectation is that they're going to have wealth because they've grown or privilege, whatever you want to call it, um, simply because they've already had it.
Right.
And they don't exactly know what it took to get where we are. And you're absolutely right. I didn't want to burden my parents ever. I wanted to be independent, obviously. Um, but I think that's first and foremost. We have to get through to not only our own children, but our children's children, the fact that our financial independence did not come to us on on a plate. We had to work to get there. And one of the ways that I believe that I don't know if we can do that for our own children at this point. I really don't know that they're ever going to truly understand that, but we can definitely do that with the younger generation, and that is through financial literacy, as you had mentioned before. And I know that we've talked with Ryan a bit about the idea of financial literacy and having children understand what is money, how do you make money in a way that is proper, and what do you do with that money? How do you save that? How do you spend it? How do you budget? Because not for nothing, I didn't have any of those things when I was in school, and Ryan, I'm guessing you probably didn't either. There was no financial literacy. I learned because I had to. It was, you want a car, you have to earn money to buy it. I'm not going to buy you a car. You want to go to college, you have to figure that out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, and so I think that that's a huge piece of what we in our generation can help our children's children. I don't think that we're going to change the mindset of our children. We're not. But, and you're absolutely right too, they're looking for balance. There is no such thing as balance in life, because there's always something that is happening. Chaos is around us always, but what we can do is figure out how to navigate through the chaos.
Very much
We
so.
don't have to stay stuck.
Yeah, and Teri, you alluded to, yeah, you got to save money to buy the car, but then once you got to that point, you realize, oh wait, there's this thing called financing. There's this
Right.
thing that I now have to. It was always a new financial lesson or learning that you need to undergo. So I want to backpedal for just a moment and double click into this idea of financial literacy. It's something that Frank and I have touched on in past episodes on kind of a more surface level, and it piggybacks beautifully because I'm sitting here with the two of you. Both of you were producers on a documentary entitled "The Truth About Reading," about addressing the plain and simple, not plain and simple, but the literacy crisis, that exists within, the United States, of just abysmal levels of literacy and levels of reading skill and comprehension throughout the country. We're talking about financial literacy, that understanding of money, how to save, how to buy that house, how to be a savvy individual for yourself so that you can set yourself up for some financial success later in life. Frank, I'll have you kind of open this one up, given your background and the conversations you have with your business owner clients and families. Talk to me a little bit about the importance of instilling financial literacy and how you and your team over at the Astriano Financial Group work through some of those conversations with those families, let's say, that might have a child,
Mhm.
5, 6, 7 years old, or maybe we're talking, 17, 18, 19 going off to college, or, maybe that college grad that's aspiring to start a business. How do you navigate these financial literacy conversations with clients?
A great question, and I don't have an expert opinion, but if I were to take different age levels, a young child in their above toddler age, I would probably refer in storytelling. And in storytelling, I would want to impress upon my grandson that there's like three buckets or three little sections of what I would do with, say, some change, some pocket change that eventually they're old enough to get without swallowing it. One is what you have to put away because it's going to take care of the necessities. And at a young age, what's necessary? You got to read your book and do your homework or whatever, and I'm going to give you a quarter, if you do that. I would say the next phase would be, and I'm thinking back of the book, The Richest Man in Babylon, give yourself a percentage for the future. So let's put this other quarter away so that you could get that bicycle, down the road that you really want. And the third would be charity. I really believe, and I think that's where Teri and I align significantly. It's hard to explain to the young generation why we give or why we give back. So for younger people, I would do storytelling and try to get them just do fundamentals of, those three buckets. As they get older, I taught my daughter, one of my triplets, when she was taking a finance class in high school. I use a cup of coffee as an example because children do not have any real concept, if they're not in finance, about present value. So I used the pods that you can get for 50 cents. There's the truck that comes around our building and you can get a cup of coffee for $1. And you could go to Starbucks and spend several dollars to get a cup of coffee. So then I try to show them what saving and going with the pod or even the single cup from the truck vendor, what you could save over the course of a year or 4 years. And when they start to see thousands of dollars saved by a decision of which type of coffee you're going to get, they start to get a sense of, this is inflation and this is, value. So I don't have a crystal ball on it, but I like what Teri said, because I do think I have more hope in the subsequent generation, because the next generation really, they couldn't help it. It wasn't their fault that they were born into a kind of a comfortable lifestyle. Our country was privileged, and it had all the amenities that other countries didn't have, and they just grew up expecting it. So I would defer to, the experts, and that's why I'm a big believer in psychology and coaching. Teri and I know that we spend a lot of money on, on coaching, and whether it's in marketing or it's in, just best practices. But I'm concerned about the future. I'm concerned about the children, and our clients are echoing that. Their money and their wealth they've achieved with good planning a surplus. And so that now they have the opportunity to give back. And it's not just money, it's wisdom.
Oh, I mean, it's in the name of the show, wisdom and wealth. I mean, there's a fiduciary duty, if you will, but more so a duty as a parent, as a guardian, to instill both of those things, wisdom and wealth, knowledge to, your children, your grandchildren. Frank, you mentioned a really good point about what parents can be doing. I love the coffee example. That's really good stuff. Teri, I'd love to get your take on the financial literacy side of things that is maybe done through the education system. I mean, you've got 3 decades worth of experience. You taught from pre-K up through higher ed. What's your take on what the education system is able to provide in terms of that financial literacy, maybe some gaps where it could be addressed, or just, I want to get your take, as a whole.
I think that the education system, the way it is set up right now, is, first of all, again, that's a whole other topic, but it's broken. Let's just face it, it is broken. And quite honestly, financial literacy is not anywhere on the radar. So I don't know whether the education system at this time is going to be the place to fix, repair, improve the situation with our children. However, I am a huge proponent of, and Frank, I love the conversation that you had with your daughter, and my thing is that if we give, and I say give, have our children earn financially, whether it's through an allowance or whatever the case may be. And I'll be really honest with you. I think the earlier we start introducing children to the idea of money and its worth, whether they're 3 or 4 or 5 years old, it doesn't matter. But what we can help them to do is, okay, you're going to do this and you're going to receive this. And then we have to give them the opportunity to make a decision. What are you going to do with it? So do you want to use your 25 cents to go to the bubblegum machine? Or would you like to put your 25 cents into a little piggy bank? And I'm a huge proponent of an actual piggy bank, okay? And save that money for something else. Now, I love The Richest Man in Babylon. That's one of my favorite books of all time. And I think it's important that we share with our even our little guys the idea of putting money away for yourself, using money for something that needs to be, making sure that there's money that needs that for things that you need, and also the idea of charity. Now, for the little guys, to me, charity is something as simple as being kind. And that is something that is missing in our overall society, because we have such a group of entitled individuals that and they're in most cases they're our children that are that entitled individual. And it's, again, as Frank says, it's not their fault. They were born into a situation where we were able to do things that our parents were not able to do. And so we gave them all the things that we didn't necessarily have. And so all of a sudden, now we've got a group of entitled individuals who think that the rest of the world should do what they want them to do. Now, that's a whole different thing than being financially literate, but it goes hand in hand with that. Because when you have money, when you have wealth, you can do things that others can't do. It provides a level of freedom that my parents, I know, didn't necessarily have that freedom. They did the very best that they could, and they taught me the value of hard work, and they taught me the value of money. But my daughter, and she is certainly not, one of the entitled people, but she knows that she comes from privilege. And not for nothing, she will use that to her advantage. Not that she shouldn't, but at the same time, she did not have the same financial education that I did. Okay, now I will say that because of who I am and the upbringing that I had and the financial background that I had, she did have to work hard. And she did have probably a different financial literacy than other people. However, that's not true across the board. And it is an entitlement.
You know,
And so, oh, go ahead, Ryan. I'm sorry.
yeah. What you were saying just there, it hit home. I had a moment earlier in my life, gosh, long time ago, where I feel like as a kid, I used to think, oh, if I had a bunch of money, I can buy a bunch of stuff. It's a 1-to-1 ratio, if you will. I can get that PlayStation, I can get that object that all the other kids have, or that seems cool. It was a very much I have the money to buy the thing, and that was always a thing. And my parents, a long time ago, instilled this newfound idea that seemed like a novelty at the time. It was, what if the money wasn't about the thing? It was about something bigger than the thing. It was about an experience. And my parents, I grew up on a farm, and I had helped paint a fence with my dad. I helped take on some chores and some other things. So I accumulated some money. And then at the end of the day, they said, okay, you worked all summer, you did all this, you've got this, piggy bank, a physical bucket of money, if you will. What if I told you that now, instead of that PlayStation that I know you want, or I know you've been thinking about, what if we as a family go to California? We've never been. Go out to Los Angeles, see it all. We're a big movie family. I mean, I know you guys have experience, obviously working in documentaries, something very passionate to me as well. Super novel idea of working, accumulating money to not buy a thing, but to buy an experience. And it was a trip that would forever change the trajectory of my life and ignite passions and all these wonderful things. So I feel that a lot of younger generation, I was guilty of this myself, accumulates money and views money as a way to buy the thing, not to contribute to the cause that I'm really passionate about, not to create that experience, not to, buy your significant other a plane ticket to go experience something. There's a lot of ways to utilize money that helps you understand the overall value and what it really can do for you when you have an abundance of it, or you have that level of financial freedom you were speaking to, Terry. I think that I wanted to share that because I thought that was an important facet of the conversation. But I want to now, guys, circle back to, the other part of our title, in wisdom. Frank, you and I have had conversations on this show surrounding an idea of what's called a family constitution. That idea where a family gets together, they talk about the values, they talk about what makes the family, move forward as a unit and fulfills them in all these different ways. I think there's a really good place for this conversation with the family constitution in today's episode. Frank, bring our audience a little bit up to speed on what a family constitution is, how it's supposed to operate, and why something like that can really help a given family navigate like the complex world that we're dealing with, that we started the conversation off with.
Well, your story about painting the fence is a good segue into something I wanted to share for the parents and grandparents that leads to the family constitution. I think one of the best books and movies that I've given out to clients is The Ultimate Gift. And there is a story about the grandson who actually had to go through these 10 steps before he got his inheritance. But just put that on your book list, because it was very apt at having insight to giving one out of a lineage of family the opportunity to experience wealth in a true, meaningful way. And going to the family constitution, which is a work in progress with me because I have two children that want to come into the wealth management field. It starts with a discovery. And within that discovery, we talk about values. I always start every client engagement or prospect with a discovery meeting, and we cover values, we cover goals, we cover interests, and so forth. And going back to the natives and the immigrants of wealth, I came from a value that I would do anything, unlimited, to help a client get to where they needed to be. And the money was an afterthought. How much I would make from that situation would be an afterthought, because it was so important for us to empower individuals to take their challenges and turn them into opportunities and get that financial freedom. And somehow, invariably, the wealth flowed over time because we did the right thing. As I try to crystallize what I want to put as a constitution for the next generation, I want to capture some balance between their perspective of pragmatism and efficiency and, work-life balance with authentic human element, caring, and doing the right thing. It's never wrong to do the right thing. And that's different for a lot of people. I think that, some young people think that it's about them, and it's very self-absorbed. They don't realize it. And they have to understand that clients don't just give over their wealth to you. They basically, you have to earn their trust. So how does trust come into play? And that takes an intrinsic instinct on their part, and it also takes a cerebral, rationalization of, what are you going to do for me? It's not about what am I going to do for you, it's what are you going to do for me? So I haven't put that into legal terms or into a Magna Charta yet, but I'm trying to, and that's part of the reason I, somewhat selfishly wanted this type of dialogue, because it's that communication. How do I communicate to the next generation that it took care, it took love, it took hard work and dedication to get to this point? How do we continue that for multiple generations? Because the history shows that most businesses don't make it past the second generation. So the family constitution, and I've talked to other family businesses and stuff, and they have different formulas. One money management firm treats each of 3 siblings the same. They all get the same salary, regardless of who's the money manager, who's the operations guy, who's the marketing guy, because dad wanted it all equal. And I'm not saying that's the right formula for everybody, but I think you want to have an understanding that, especially in this day and age where gender matters, do you bring a sister into the business, and then what's family leave look like? What are you going to do if you have one boy and one girl, and how are they going to view the parity of time and sweat equity? So I don't have the perfect script yet. I'm working on it. I deal with attorneys, for the legal end of it. That's where prenuptials and postnuptials come in and things of that nature. But the human element, you and I have talked so much about it, Ryan, is, how do we instill that we're not AI robots? We are real, breathing, bleeding human beings, and we are taking care of people's problems.
Sure. And Teri, this, I'm not sure if this is the first time you're hearing that phrase or not, the idea of a family constitution, but I'd love to get your reaction to that. Why, what you think about that idea, and also just how important those values conversations are, starting at an early age, to try and foster not only that sense of financial literacy we mentioned a moment ago, but that sense of values moving through a child's life.
Well, it's very interesting. Frank, you and I are so much more aligned than I think either one of us have imagined, because in my book Untamed Chaos, one of the things that I talk about is having a family meeting, okay, and actually talking about how each person in the family is feeling, and even with the little children, how they're feeling, what they want, what they don't want, how they imagine things are in the home, and ultimately ending up in creating something similar to a constitution, but it's more of, I simply call it an agreement. It's a contract where these are the things that are expected from each one of us in the family. This is what it's going to look like. This is what it's going to sound like. And these are going to be the consequences of this, following all of these things. And these are going to be the consequences of not. So that everything is laid out, plain and opened. And it is a work in progress, because we as humans are ever changing. We are consistently evolving. Now, the piece that struck me so brilliantly, Frank, is that you simply are talking about the idea of humanity. And that is something that has been lost in many ways. Part of that is the simple fact that as caring adults, as parents, grandparents, caregivers, whatever you are, is that you have to model that, because our children see and hear everything that we do and say. And so, Ryan, I'm going to compliment your parents, because although I've never met them, you are a very kind person. You are a very humane individual. So obviously your parents taught that to you, whether knowingly or unknowingly. Same thing with you, Frank. And I consider myself to be a pretty kind person. But my parents modeled that. My parents didn't model being entitled. My parents modeled caring about not only about myself and my family, but about other people around me. And so I think that that's, quite honestly, it's the hardest thing to do, but it's also the simplest thing to do. And that's where we have to start. We really have to start with something. I call it, you've all heard it, keep it simple, silly, the KISS method. So start with the most simple thing and just be kind to someone else. Not all individuals have the same financial background, the same academic background, the same, family dynamic, obviously. And so you never know what somebody else is going through when they're acting the way they are. But if you're kind to them, you've done the right thing. Kindness is always the right thing. And it starts there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, and thanks for the kind words there, Terry. I appreciate it. Terry, as we're kind of bringing our conversation to a head, I mean, you're doing some great work out there with the families that you work with, the parents, and kind of fostering, a positive impact really on a lot of the families that you work with. Anything on the horizon that you want to let our audience know about? Anything you're working on now that you're passionate about, or that we should keep an eye out for from Dr. Teri Rouse?
Sure, there's a couple things. So first, first of all, I just recently released my book, Untamed Chaos: A Parent's Guide to Improving Communication, Resolving Conflict, and Restoring Peace in Your Home. And that is out and about. It is a working journal book that gives parents easily implemented tools and techniques and tips to restore that peace in your home, starting with having a conversation with your children and ending, all the way with creating boundaries for yourself and for your family, and creating a contract with your family, so what it looks like, and what all of your expectations are. I also have a book coming out with Lisa Nichols shortly, which I'm really excited about. And I'm doing a lot of speaking in groups, and happy to be out into the world sharing what I do for myself and for other families, and trying to make the world a better place.
Well, you're doing a great job at it, Terry. Keep it up, of
Thanks.
course. And Frank, before we wrap up today, any final thoughts or questions, while we've got Terry here? Anything you want to leave our audience with?
I just love the alignment on that thinking, and I really look forward to turning these challenges that we're all facing into opportunities. And I think Rise Up is a good participation, because I think we as parents, grandparents, and children and grandchildren all need to rise up to bring humanity back to what it's meant to be.
I love that. Well, guys, thank you both. Terry, again, appreciate you and your time jumping on with us today. And of course, Frank, as always, if anybody out there in our audience is interested in reaching out to you and your team, they can always look you up and reach out, via the Astorinofinancialgroup.com. But also, look, folks, we're going to take a final moment, as we typically do here on the show, and thank you for stopping by and spending some time with us in your day. If you enjoyed today's conversation with Frank and Dr. Terry, you learned a thing or two. I know I did, of course. Make sure you hit that subscribe button on whichever platform you checked us out on today, so that you don't miss out on any other great conversations where either Frank and I dive into wealth management topics, or we bring on a guest expert like Dr. Terry and jump into their world, those unique challenges that they see, and unpack all that there is there. Before Frank and Dr. Terry, I'm Ryan. We're going to go ahead and say so long now, but we appreciate you stopping by and being with us on Wisdom and Wealth.